This is a story about a man who managed to overcome many difficulties, found strength within himself, and opened a new path to happiness. Betrayal, love, struggle, and victory. All of this awaits you in a tale that will touch your emotions and make you reflect on life. The mobile phone rang at the worst possible moment while I was concentrating on the task at hand. I pulled it from my pocket and saw an unfamiliar number. Worried it might be a sales call, I picked up. It turned out to be something even less welcome. "May I speak to Mark Mallon?" a formal voice asked. I confirmed that I was Mark Mallon. "Please wait for Miss Peterson," the voice commanded. Instead, I chose to end the call. As expected, within a minute, there was another ring. "Mr. Mallon, apologies for the disconnection. Please wait for Miss Peterson." Again, I ended the call. Soon the phone rang once more and I picked up. A frustrated tone was evident from the caller as she tried to explain the situation. I cut her off. "Please tell Miss Peterson that I'm not interested in speaking with her today or any other day," I said. After hanging up, I attempted to return to my task, but within 5 minutes, the phone rang again. Recognizing the number from earlier, I let it go to voicemail. The notification that I had a voicemail didn't tempt me to check it. By then, I had made up my mind about my project and started organizing my materials. When the phone rang once more, breaking the peace, I finally switched it off. One of the initial lessons I learned about using power tools was the importance of focus. It wasn't just safer, but also made time fly. I aligned two 2x4 by 10 pine boards vertically, spacing them 16 inches apart. Then I placed a horizontal 2x4x10s, one above and two below. Using a tape measure, I confirmed everything was aligned and began attaching each stud with a power nailer, securing them into the structure. After reviewing my work and deeming it satisfactory, I stood the structure up against the basement wall. Leaning on the structure, I located a pre-drilled hole on the lower horizontal board, took the nailer, and secured the base with long concrete nails. A quick check with my level confirmed it was fine. Then I secured the top. Another inspection to ensure everything was straight, and I took a step back to assess. On its own, it didn't look impressive in the bare basement, but I had erected the frame in 15 minutes. At this rate, I could finish all the framing by evening. Moving closer to completion, I was relieved that earlier tasks like installing conduit lines, electrical wiring, and HVAC ducts were done. Thankfully, the plumbing was already in place, sparing me that trouble. I planned to finish the framing tonight, install insulation and paneling on Saturday, and lay the wood parquet tiles on Sunday. This would earn me my weekend treat, a 6-pack of beer chilling in my cooler. It amazed me that in a few weeks, the entire basement project would be complete. It also reflected how I had limited my beer consumption to a single 6-pack per weekend, 2 beers a day after finishing my daily chores. Not long ago, a 6-pack was just the start of a night of heavy drinking. This change was all thanks to Miss Peterson, Denise Peterson, my ex-wife. I couldn't help but feel bitter towards Denise, wondering how someone I had been so deeply in love with could become such a nuisance. I pushed myself to concentrate again on my task. The more I worked, the less time I had to think. The quicker I finished, the sooner I could dive into a warm shower and drink my 2 beers before heading off to sleep. If I was lucky, there would be no dreams. That was the essence of my life these days, finding ways to stay busy so there wouldn't be time for sorrow. It was a terrible way to exist, but it was better than feeling like dying every single day. With that thought, I prepared the lumber for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th frames. I trudged upstairs for my drink and a warm shower before bed. When I woke up, I remembered to switch my phone back on. 20 missed calls and voicemail messages, all from the same person as the day before. I deleted all the messages without listening to whatever Denise thought was important. As I got dressed, I felt uplifted by the thought that I wouldn't be disturbed over the weekend. I went to my computer, addressed a few urgent business matters, sent out emails to handle them, and then went downstairs. A quick visit to the kitchen gave me a bowl of Wheaties. I ate my breakfast of champions with a sigh, went back to the basement, put on my mask, and began fitting the insulation rolls into the frames. I had a portable radio set to a classic rock station, which helped me pass the time. The mix of music, the sounds of my work, and the occasional curse word kept me occupied. By mid-afternoon, I had finished installing the insulation and went upstairs to make a sandwich. As I ate the turkey sandwich, I gazed outside at the dreary, rainy November day. It reminded me of another rainy November day last year. I recalled standing soaked outside my in-laws' house after arriving in Chicago on Thanksgiving morning for what was meant to be a surprise visit. I certainly hadn't received an invitation from my wife, kids, or in-laws. When the door opened, I saw the shocked expression on my brother-in-law's face. Before he could offer a weak excuse, I walked past him into the lively atmosphere of the house, which instantly became silent at my arrival. My 14-year-old son Brian looked at the ground, while Susan, my 17-year-old daughter, quickly left the room. My wife, Denise, got up from the lap of a stranger who had been holding her closely. Despite her embarrassment, she tried to downplay the situation by introducing me to Paul Starling, the stranger. He stood up and offered his hand, but I just stared at him until he withdrew it. Meanwhile, my dear mother-in-law hurried into the room to ensure nothing dramatic happened. At least I thought she did. I was making her carpet wet as rain dripped from my trench coat. "Why, Mark, we weren't expecting you. When did you get here?" I heard the woman, who I considered a witch, say. I ignored her as I attempted to meet my wife's gaze, but she seemed to find something extremely interesting on her mother's wall and refused to look at me. I returned to the entrance and stepped outside. I took out my mobile phone and dialed the taxi company, hoping to hail the same taxi that had just left before it went too far. Nobody from the house came out to convince me to stay. I let out a sigh as the distressing memory concluded. I made my way back to the basement to start putting up the panels. The task progressed swiftly because the panels, despite being cumbersome, covered a wide space. I used panel nails to fasten them into the wall studs with my hammer. Fortunately, the panels, which had openings for electric sockets and heating and cooling vents, all matched flawlessly. Now I could activate the heating system, but I discovered that the physical effort of my work quickly warmed me, making additional heating unnecessary. I felt satisfied with my meticulous preparations, ending up with only a few planks and some extra panels left over. I transported these to the garage and stored them for future use in the workshop. I then fitted the electric sockets and finalized the wiring for each one, following the standard color coding to avoid any mix-ups between ground and live wires. After connecting the system to a circuit breaker in the breaker panel, I tested each new socket to ensure they were powered and confirmed proper airflow through the HVAC system. While it might not seem like a major achievement, attaching the outlet covers and cleaning up the space felt rewarding. I vacuumed the floor several times with a shop vacuum to prepare it for the adhesive I planned to apply the next day. But for now, a hot shower called to me. The warm water eased my sore muscles as I let the steam envelop me. It was a stark contrast to the bone-chilling cold I had felt returning to O'Hare Airport the previous Thanksgiving. I was both physically and emotionally frozen as I arranged an expensive flight home. I knew then that my marriage was over, though I wasn't sure when the formal end would come. After drying off, I headed to bed, looking forward to another fulfilling day of work. I fell asleep almost instantly. Sunday morning greeted me with the sound of a thunderstorm brewing outside. I put on my jeans, work boots, and a t-shirt before heading downstairs, hoping the electricity wouldn't fail during the day. I tuned the radio to a sports channel to catch the game while I worked. I began evenly spreading adhesive across the basement floor. Initially, I had considered installing a custom oak parquet floor, but opted for pre-made tiles to save on costs. The tiles were ready near the stairs, waiting for the adhesive to dry enough for placement. Once the tiles were set, I went back upstairs and started mentally planning my next big task: sanding, staining, and varnishing the floors. I made a list of the equipment I needed to rent, like a floor sander and buffer, while noting that I already had smaller tools like pry bars, hammers, brushes, and rollers. I needed to be especially careful not to damage the antique baseboards or moldings, so I planned to catalog each piece to ensure they were returned to their correct spots. Feeling ready to tackle the day, I brewed a pot of coffee in the newly renovated kitchen, which I had completed a month earlier. Bright fluorescent lights illuminated the space, and the modern appliances gleamed. I settled into the breakfast corner next to the food prep island I had built. The Mexican glazed tiles I'd chosen brought a vibrant atmosphere to the space. During the renovation, I had removed a non-structural wall that once separated the kitchen from a small dining area meant for servants. This significantly enlarged the space, allowing me to add more shelves and a pantry. It almost felt too spacious, so I eventually decided to install a brick pizza oven, which became the perfect finishing touch. Thinking about pizza reminded me of how I met Denise, and my mind wandered back to those days. It was during a freshman gathering at a local pizza joint near my university. I hadn't wanted to attend, but my roommate convinced me to go. I was sipping on an illegal underage drink when I noticed a tall, dark-haired woman nearby. She had an athletic build, long toned legs, and an incredible figure. She was being harassed by a drunken guy. Before I could make out what he was saying, she slapped him across the face. He looked like he might retaliate, so I stepped in between them. His anger didn't subside, and he kept pushing me, trying to get past. Eventually, the security staff intervened and removed him. When I turned around, I found myself looking into the most beautiful green eyes I had ever seen. She introduced herself as Denise, and I told her my name was Mark. We chatted for a while before she had to leave. I thought that was the last I'd see of her. A month later, as I was crossing campus, I heard someone shouting my name. A frantic woman in a worn t-shirt with Greek letters printed on it ran up to me and asked, "Do you have a condom?" My shocked expression must have prompted her to explain. It was for a sorority initiation task. Blushing, I handed her the condom I'd been carrying since 9th grade. She ran off excitedly, and I watched her stunning figure disappear into the distance. Another month went by, and as campus buzzed with excitement for homecoming, I was walking back to my dorm when someone started walking alongside me. "Hi, ready to save me for the third time?" she asked. I was confused, so she explained that she needed a date to avoid going to homecoming with someone from a brother fraternity. Despite my sarcastic reply, she didn't catch on and told me where to meet her. Later, my roommate encouraged me to go, cheekily suggesting I might get lucky. But luck wasn't on my side. Denise and I spent the day talking, ignoring the football game entirely. Afterward, we visited a small cafe and continued our conversation until the place closed. As we walked back to her place, I hesitated, unsure whether to kiss her. She made the decision for me, saying goodnight and leaving without so much as a peck on the cheek. Over the next month, I tried to contact Denise, but she always seemed unavailable. Eventually, I heard she had started seeing someone else. Disheartened, I felt like I had missed my chance before it even began. A loud thunderclap jolted me out of my daydream. I returned to laying down tiles in the basement, fitting them together along their tongue-and-groove edges. I half listened to the game on the radio, pausing only to fetch more tiles when needed. After finishing the floor, I admired how well it matched the walls. Eager to continue, I secured the skirting boards in place. With that, the main construction was complete. All that remained was installing track lighting and crown moldings, leaving the decoration for another day. Today, I planned to celebrate. The business week was about to begin, and I intended to devote my weekdays to earning money. Evenings would be for minor chores around the house, leaving weekends for substantial projects. That Friday, I visited Home Depot to rent a floor sander and buffer, loading them onto my work truck along with various grades of sandpaper pads for the project. Throughout the week, I had carefully removed and cataloged every piece of molding and baseboard, sanding them down in preparation. Using the sander, I smoothed the floors, knowing the edges would be hidden by the reinstalled moldings and baseboards. This eliminated the need to sand right up to the walls. My phone rang, a call from Denise's office. Over the past week, her calls had become so frequent that I added her number to my speed dial for quick recognition. The sound reminded me of a call I received years ago during my college days while studying in the dorm. Assuming it was from my already departed roommate, I picked up the phone, prepared to relay a message. "Where the hell are you?" the caller demanded. Taken aback, I asked, "Who is this?" "It's Denise." "Now, where the hell are you?" she retorted, clearly agitated. Annoyed, I responded, "Why do you expect me to know where you are? Just come over here pronto," she insisted. Despite my reservations, the prospect of seeing her swayed me. I found myself at her sorority house shortly after. Upon announcing myself, I waited and soon observed Denise vigorously arguing with a guy. Their dispute seemed intense, and her pointing at me elicited a disdainful glance from him. She hurried outside, announcing we needed to leave, and led me away. After a while, I stopped and asked for an explanation. She angrily informed me that the same fraternity guy had been troubling her again. Bewildered as to why this was my issue, I sarcastically inquired if she couldn't have asked her boyfriend for help instead. "Why didn't you call your boyfriend?" I asked. She retorted sharply, "Why didn't you call your girlfriend?" Frustrated, I turned and walked away, finding myself back at the cafe where we had celebrated our homecoming date. Moments later, she entered, sat beside me, and initiated a conversation. Before I realized it, my anger had dissipated. Denise then expressed a desire to date me, but with a condition. "Look, I find you appealing, but I'm not ready to commit exclusively to one person. I'd like to date you and others. If we're truly meant for each other, we'll both feel it. Can you accept that?" The thought of sharing her was unappealing, but when she leaned in for a kiss, I understood I was hopelessly captivated. Sometimes I managed to secure a date with her. Other times, I'd sulk in my room, agonizing over her being with someone else. After 4 months, we became intimate in her car, deepening my feelings for her. Despite my efforts to persuade her to be exclusive, she insisted on seeing others. This perplexing carousel continued for 2 years until one day, Denise approached me with news. "I'm pregnant," she said, freezing time. She assured me the baby was mine, anticipating my reaction. Internally, I was panicking. I had 1 more year left to earn my business administration degree, followed by an MBA and a promising career. Proposing to Denise seemed premature. She, too, had ambitious plans to complete her history degree and attend law school, extending our education by 3 years. Suddenly, all our plans needed revision. We deliberated and decided on a discreet wedding. I would work to support her through law school, and once she secured employment, she would support me through my MBA. We envisioned a future of shared success. Then turmoil ensued. Her mother, whom I privately referred to as the evil witch of the North, berated me for ruining her daughter's life, relentlessly harassing me thereafter. My grandmother, who raised me, insisted on a prenuptial agreement to safeguard the house I was set to inherit. Denise was initially furious, but eventually agreed. We proceeded with our modest wedding and began cohabitating. That final school year was challenging. Denise's pregnancy and my array of odd jobs, landscaping, minor repairs, contract work, stretched me thin. No task was beneath me if it contributed financially. Despite the hardships, we graduated, and Denise gave birth to our daughter, Susan, just before starting law school. Her mother proudly adorned her home with graduation and baby photos, excluding me. I secured an internship at a stock brokerage, undertaking menial tasks, but persistence paid off. I earned my broker's license and began trading stocks under a senior broker. As my income grew, so did our expenses. Denise always found new ways to deplete every earned penny. In her final year of law school, she announced another pregnancy. 8 months later, our son Brian arrived. Now, I found myself juggling the roles of father to a newborn and toddler, all while supporting a wife focused on finals and the bar exam. Despite frustrations, I maintained my composure, knowing how important Denise's goals were. Graduation came. Denise finished third in her class. Watching her walk across the stage with our children in my arms filled me with pride. She radiated happiness as she introduced me to her classmates before heading off to celebrate. She didn't return home until 10 o'clock the next morning, citing exhaustion and needing to stay at a friend's house. When I expressed my frustration over her lack of communication, we argued, upsetting the children. I spent hours soothing them, determined to overlook the incident. If I thought law school was demanding, the bar exam preparation was another level. Denise and her colleagues dedicated themselves entirely for 4 grueling months. I supported her in every way, from foot massages to late-night ice cream runs. She excelled, achieving the highest score on the bar exam, and quickly secured a lucrative corporate position in Dallas. We moved, and I postponed my MBA plans as Denise persuaded me to focus on maximizing our income. She assured me that once she achieved partnership at her firm, she would support my ambitions. For now, she argued, building a dual-income household was critical. I found employment at a brokerage firm in Dallas, but soon discovered Denise's unilateral approach to our finances. Her earnings remained a mystery, while I was responsible for all expenses, rent, car payments, household bills, student loans, and more. We spent a decade in Dallas before Denise was transferred to Atlanta by her company. Today, I decided to take a moment to celebrate. The business week was about to start, and I planned to focus my days on earning a living. Evenings would be reserved for small household chores, saving weekends for larger projects. That Friday, I visited Home Depot to rent a floor sander and buffer, loading them into my truck along with various grades of sandpaper. Throughout the week, I had carefully removed and cataloged each piece of molding and baseboard, sanding them in preparation for refinishing the floors. Using the sander, I planned to smooth the floors, knowing the edges would be concealed when the moldings were reinstalled. During this time, my phone rang. It was another call from Denise's office, a now frequent occurrence over the past week. Her number had become so familiar I'd saved it to my speed dial. The call brought back memories of a Friday long ago in college. Assuming it was from my departed roommate, I answered the dorm phone only to be met with an agitated voice demanding, "Where the hell are you?" Confused, I asked who was calling. "It's Denise." "Now, where the hell are you?" Despite my irritation, the prospect of seeing her swayed me, and I found myself at her sorority house shortly after. Upon arrival, I noticed her arguing with a man. Their heated exchange ended with her pointing at me, prompting a disdainful glare from him. She hurriedly announced we needed to leave and led me away. After a while, I stopped and asked what was going on. She explained the man had been bothering her again. When I questioned how this involved me, she snapped, "Why didn't you call your boyfriend for help?" Frustrated, I turned and left, finding solace in a nearby cafe where we had once celebrated homecoming. Unexpectedly, she joined me there, apologized, and initiated conversation. Her charm disarmed me. Then she made a proposal. "Look, I like you, but I'm not ready to commit exclusively. I want to date you and others. If we're meant for each other, we'll feel it. Can you accept that?" Her honesty stung, but when she leaned in for a kiss, I realized I was hopelessly captivated. This complicated dynamic continued for months, growing into years. 4 months in, we became intimate, deepening my feelings for her. Despite my attempts to persuade her to commit, she remained steadfast in seeing others. 2 years later, she approached me with life-altering news. "I'm pregnant." Time froze. She assured me the child was mine. Though overwhelmed, I tried to focus on the future. With 1 year left until earning my business administration degree, followed by plans for an MBA, and Denise aiming for law school, our lives took a sharp turn. We agreed to marry quietly. My grandmother, who had raised me, insisted on a prenuptial agreement to safeguard her house. Though Denise initially resisted, she relented. Our modest wedding was challenging, with Denise pregnant and me working odd jobs to support us. Despite hardships, we graduated, welcomed our daughters Susan, and Denise started law school. As I rushed outside, rain splattering the pavement, I tapped on the driver's window of the U-Haul truck. The startled driver looked up at me, tears streaming down her face as she juggled calming two young children in the front seat and figuring out how to handle the mess in front of her. "Do you need help?" I asked gently. Relief washed over her face as she nodded tearfully. "Yes, please," she whispered. I opened the door, handed her my umbrella, and gestured for her to move to the passenger side. She quickly unbuckled the children and ushered them to the shelter of the front porch. Meanwhile, I climbed into the driver's seat, adjusted the steering wheel, and shifted into low gear. I carefully pressed the accelerator to avoid spinning the tires and eased the truck forward, guiding it out of the muddy yard. Though it required crossing more of her front lawn, it was the most straightforward approach. With a bit of maneuvering, I managed to align the truck and trailer into the driveway, ready for unloading. I turned off the engine and jogged toward the porch, ducking against the rain. The children cheered as their mother, a blonde angel with a warm smile, finally exhaled in relief. "Here are your keys," I said, placing them in her small hand. "Thank you so much," she replied, her sweet southern accent tugging at my heart. I didn't know what to do. "Always happy to help a neighbor," I said with a smile. "My name's Mark Malone. I take it you're my new neighbor." She nodded. "Oh, where are my manners? I'm Jeannie Harris. And these two rascals are Kay and Billy." The children immediately protested, clinging to her legs and begging her to stop embarrassing them. We both laughed at their antics. "I hope you've arranged for help with unloading," I remarked. "That truck looks pretty packed." Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of exhaustion. "I had help loading, but it's just the three of us for unloading." "Let me give you a hand," I offered. "If it's too much, I can call some friends to assist." Her eyes lit up with gratitude. "You'd really do that?" "Thank you. That would be amazing." We got to work, starting with the smaller boxes. Jeannie carried the lighter loads while the children watched from the porch, debating who would get which bedroom. The commotion was endearing, and Jeannie caught me smiling at them. "Leave the heavy boxes to me," I reminded her, gently taking one from her hands. Soon, the dimly lit house became busier. The rain provided just enough light to see. But when Jeannie expressed frustration about the lack of electricity, I made a quick call to a friend at the electric utility. He explained that he hadn't been able to install the meter earlier due to company policy requiring someone to be home. However, he owed me a favor and agreed to come by immediately. Minutes later, electricity coursed through the house, prompting cheers from the children as they ran room to room. With the lights on, we unloaded more efficiently, though it was clear the task was monumental. Seeing the workload, I called a few friends. Within an hour, they arrived with their spouses, children, pizza, and drinks. More importantly, they came ready to help. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Furniture was set up, boxes unpacked, and items distributed to the appropriate rooms. The living room was the last to be arranged, signaling the end of the truck's unloading. Jeannie handled the impromptu gathering with surprising ease, her friendly demeanor quickly winning over everyone. Phone numbers were exchanged, and plans for future meetups were made. Later, as the house quieted, Jeannie allowed me to carry her sleepy children upstairs. She tucked them in, kissing their foreheads before we silently retreated downstairs. Outside on the front steps, I offered her a beer, but she declined. I opened one for myself and took a long sip, enjoying the stillness of the night. "Mark, you're my hero," she said softly. "Thank you for everything you've done." "Just being a good neighbor," I replied, brushing off her praise. She shook her head. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be stuck in my front yard with 2 crying kids and no electricity. I laughed. "Wait until you know me better," I joked, taking another sip. Her smile faded as she shared the stress of driving the U-Haul cross-country, recounting rude drivers, cramped stops, and the embarrassment of maneuvering the large vehicle. "And now I have to drive it all the way back," she added, clearly overwhelmed. "Jeannie," I said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, "I'll return the truck for you." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You do that?" "Of course," I said firmly. "You've been through enough. Let me handle this." After some back and forth, she reluctantly agreed. I assured her I'd leave in the morning and sort everything out. As the night wound down, she gave me a warm hug and kissed my cheek. The next day, I departed with the truck, but made a quick detour to the local U-Haul center. My friend Perry, the manager, greeted me warmly. "Perry," I said, "I'm returning this for a friend. Can we convert it to a one-way rental?" After a heated call with the original rental location, Perry agreed to process the return. He handed me the receipt with a wink. "Don't mention it, Mark." I smiled, relieved to have solved Jeannie's problem. As I walked out, I couldn't help but feel like I had made the right choice, helping a neighbor in need and perhaps starting a meaningful new chapter in my own life. Now, she was left with the hope of a job in the school district and an underperforming hedge fund, which she would need to tap into for her expenses until her job began. Unexpected house repairs also drained her savings, yet she had no regrets about her move. We sat in silence, reflecting as the swing gently moved. Then, I offered to examine her hedge fund account, confident that I could improve its performance. She fetched the files, and I promised to review them overnight. She asked me to return them the following evening, when we would have dinner. After a good night kiss and returning home, I scrutinized her account and noticed the unethical practices of the manager, who was not only corrupt but also incompetent in his stock selection. I was certain I could achieve a 30% improvement in her account within a year. Preparing my notes for Jeannie, I still thought about her kiss. Dinner at Jeannie's included delicious food, children's games, and bedtime stories. This time, I read to Kate, wished her a good night, and prepared for a colder evening indoors. I needed the table for my analysis and projections for Jeannie. I had everything ready when she came down, and we made another pot of coffee. She inquired about what I had discovered. I informed her that she was being deceived and offered my assistance. As I started to elaborate, she moved towards the den, curious. I questioned if something was wrong, and she reassured me that nothing was, expressing her trust in me. Thus, negating the need for further explanations, she suggested we head to the den to unwind. Following her, we settled in for a conversation that lasted into the night. As the fire in the hearth dwindled, I acknowledged that despite our age gap, the comfort I felt with Jeannie in this brief period surpassed that with Denise. After a good night kiss, I left with her authorization to manage her stock portfolio and an open invitation for dinner. Upon awakening, I set about securing Jeannie's financial well-being. I informed her previous broker of his termination and my takeover. His resistance waned when I hinted at contacting the SEC. Shortly, he consented to refund Jeannie all his fees, amounting to $5,000, evidenced by a swift electronic confirmation. A mere 10 minutes of effort allowed me to start optimizing her investments, disposing of unprofitable stocks for more stable ones, and allocating the rest to high-risk, high-reward stocks requiring vigilant oversight. I opted not to charge her for my services. By day's end, I was content with my achievements. Dinner next door was a joyful affair. When I attempted to discuss the day's events, Jeannie interjected, assuring me of her trust and dismissing the need for daily updates. Hence, I persisted with her portfolio management, enjoying her company nightly. Weekends transitioned from solitary home improvements to exploring the city with Jeannie and her children. However, this wasn't entirely accurate, as I also assisted with repairs at Jeannie's home, applying my skills to propose various solutions for her to choose from. Our relationship's pace was dictated by Jeannie, evolving from kisses to more intimate moments once the children were asleep, maintaining boundaries she felt comfortable with. The arrival of Jeannie's brother, Ray, and his family marked a new chapter. As we barbecued steaks, I sought to make a genuine impression, knowing Jeannie would value his opinion. I openly expressed my love for Jeannie and my intention to marry her when she felt ready, acknowledging the importance of his perspective. Despite our recent acquaintance, Ray recognized my support for Jeannie and the children from the start, affirming our compatibility, but cautioning against causing harm, lest we confront a serious conflict. Our mutual understanding was sealed as we clinked beer bottles and brought the steaks indoors. After dinner, Billy and Kay escorted their cousins upstairs while Jeannie and I conversed with Ray and his spouse. Our discussion evolved to a point where Ray and Jeannie started sharing awkward moments from their youth. Jeannie would laugh loudly in playful objection as Ray kept going. The evening eventually progressed, and Ray glanced at his wife, suggesting, "Sweetheart, let's put the kids to bed and then head to sleep in Jeannie's room." With this suggestion, the atmosphere shifted, and we all bid each other good night quietly. Jeannie and I joined hands as we made our way into my home to my bedroom, where we experienced the most passionate and unforgettable night together. I'm unsure how long we spent basking in satisfaction afterward, but soon we both realized that our exertions had made us hungry. As we chuckled and got up from the bed, I grabbed my shorts and was about to put on my t-shirt when Jeannie mentioned she had claimed it as her attire. I felt a surge of affection for her as she teasingly wore my shirt like a dress, and we headed downstairs to raid the fridge. I was happy to find our chat calm and natural, navigating from being acquaintances to friends and then intimate partners. Every look I took of her at the kitchen table, sitting with her legs casually propped up, wearing nothing but my t-shirt, intensified my desire for her. I scooped her into my arms and carried her back to my bedroom. As I gazed in wonder at her, I knew I was ready to do anything for her, to defend her fiercely, ensuring nothing would ever separate us. It was in this moment of unexpected joy that I recognized the distinction between Denise and Jeannie. The era of grieving the past and immersing myself in work had concluded. It was time to embrace life anew. I nestled close to Jeannie, draping my arm over her as a shield through the night. We both sensed the promise of a joyous morning ahead. After sharing a good night kiss, we drifted off to sleep. Time flew until one day, the doorbell echoed unexpectedly, revealing Denise, her companion Paul Starling, alongside Susan and Brian. I had somewhat anticipated their return, informed by rumors of their arrival in town. Denise expressed she had a proposal for me, awaiting my reaction. With the door shut behind them, their unease was palpable, given my lack of hospitality. After a brief silence, since I felt no compulsion to speak to them, Denise overcame the awkwardness. She admitted her mishandling of our past and expressed a desire for reconciliation. It emerged that Paul was a fraternity member paired with her by her sorority, igniting a rivalry. Unbeknownst to us, Denise had continued her liaison with him, admitting their relationship was uncertain regarding her pregnancy. Denise hoped I'd understand the children's wish to connect with their biological dad. As she spoke, I managed to keep my anger in check, silently listening to her justify her actions as being in the best interest, especially after my career had plateaued. She sought the best possible outcome for her children through divorce. This is why she had demanded half of the profits from the sale of the marital home, despite the fact that I had been the one to make all the mortgage payments.